Absolutely loads going on, but let's start with the developments in Arsenal's attempts to sign Bruno Guimarães from Newcastle and Vinicius Junior from Real Madrid. Darmish, let's start with Guimarães then. Where are we with this one?
Right, Mike, we've had weeks and weeks of Arsenal exploring a deal via intermediaries. There was claims and counterclaims. Sources at Newcastle were saying, no, there's been no formal club-to-club contact. Finally, this week, there was that formal club-to-club contact. Arsenal made their move, they made their bid. Newcastle United said thanks, but no thanks, and they rejected that bid. We now know that Arsenal and Newcastle are continuing talks over the transfer of Bruno Guimarães. And we are told that there is now a cautious optimism that a deal can be struck between the clubs. Now, Guimarães is currently with the Newcastle United squad at their pre-season training camp in La Manga. He is just waiting for the green light to travel and do a medical with Arsenal. Now, people have sometimes, and quite unfairly, I'd say, compared this deal and this potential deal with what happened with Alexander Isak from Newcastle United to Liverpool last summer. I think this is very different because Bruno Guimarães has been very respectful of Newcastle United. He hasn't agitated for a move, but he has made it clear to them that he probably would like to go to Arsenal, provided the two clubs came to an agreement over a deal that suited Newcastle United. So that's where we were then. They want him to stay. Make no mistake about it. They do not want to see another key player leave the club. They've already seen Sandro Tonali leave, Anthony Gordon leave. The Bruno Guimarães one would be a completely different scale because he's not only their most influential midfielder, he's their captain, he's their talisman. He has always said, this is my city now. I'm one of you. I'm effectively a Geordie. But he wants to win trophies as well. And the way it's structured at Newcastle and the way the financial rules have worked out for Newcastle, it's been very, very difficult for them to be able to spend as big as they would want to. Hence, to challenge at the very top of the league has been very, very difficult. You've got to give credit to Eddie Howe for winning that first trophy in over 50 years, for getting them Champions League finishes. But his ambition goes further than that. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Newcastle hold the option of a further year, but I think it is edging towards now the direction of travel you'd have to say is edging towards a move from the northeast to North London.
Absolutely. When Darmish started that, he said Arsenal were cautiously optimistic. He's just finished by saying it's stronger than that. This is inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think Bruno has to, as always, tread carefully because of his affinity with Newcastle United, calling himself a Geordie, getting emotional when they won the Carabao Cup. And he's been a great captain. He's probably been one of Eddie Howe's, if not Eddie Howe's, best signing for Newcastle United since the takeover. I think Newcastle fans looked at Alexander Isak and knew he wasn't a Newcastle boy. Sandro Tonali has often said his heart is always going to be in Italy, and then obviously he moves to Tottenham Hotspur. But the Bruno one will hurt. It stings. But, as Darmish said, it does feel inevitable, and I think it's a huge signing for Arsenal Football Club because this is a player who's been absolutely fantastic for Newcastle United. He brings so much leadership, and he will add so much quality to that Arsenal midfield if that goes through.
Yeah, indeed. Well, intimating, suggesting that Arsenal are not going to get their man. But, Darmish, just give us some scenarios where it could still happen.
I mean, I've looked at 4 options, really, with regard to Vinicius Junior, and you can make your own mind up about who holds the cards in each one here. But when a player comes down to the final year of his contract, it usually is the player that holds the cards. Now, scenario 1 is Vinicius Junior signs a new contract at Real Madrid. And he is a key player at Real Madrid currently, and he will continue to be a key player under Jose Mourinho for years to come, given how long that contract is. So all the talk of Arsenal will just end there and then if he signs a new deal. Then there are the scenarios if he doesn't sign a new deal. So if he doesn't sign a new deal, and then he could get sold in this transfer window. And that's going to be easier said than done for all the reasons we've been talking about financially, not least his wages and what the transfer fee would be for such a player of his ability. Then he doesn't sign, but he leaves for free. And that can come in 2 forms at 2 stages. Next January, he can sign a pre-contract agreement with a club outside Spain ahead of a move in the summer, or next summer, just bide his time and sign for free for any club in the world, and Real Madrid will not get a penny for a player that they probably rate, even with a year left on his contract, upwards of £130 million. The other scenario is probably a high-risk one as far as Real Madrid are concerned, and that is he doesn't sign, but then Real Madrid try and use the final year of his contract to convince him to stay at the club, which would probably be the last case scenario. But something tells me, I know Gary is very adamant that he will stay, and that is very still likely to happen, that he's going to stay at Real Madrid. But I just think Real Madrid will need some sort of clarity sooner rather than later that either he signs a contract or he is definitely going to sign a contract, because the later in the window we go, the more jeopardy there is on Vinicius Jr. and Real Madrid, because come September the 1st, if he hasn't signed a new contract, they are very vulnerable then at that point, Real Madrid. And I just wonder whether they will start to try and put a bit of pressure on Vinicius Jr. Sign a contract, yeah, you're going to be a key player, you're going to be playing in your favoured position down that left-hand side alongside Kylian Mbappe and maybe Yan Diomande if and when he comes in. You don't sign a new contract, well, Yan Diomande, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later on, he can play on the left-hand side as well. So Vinicius Jr., you might find your game time a little bit limited.
Yeah, so he doesn't play as well as Vinicius Jr., does he?
I know, it's one of those, do you cut your nose off to spite your face? But we're talking about over £100 million here, which is why Real Madrid and Vinicius Jr. on both sides are going to have to think about what they're going to do next.
Thing is, Michael, I think Real Madrid have got all the cards, because I don't think anyone can afford Vinicius Jr.'s wages.
That's the interesting one for me, is that, you know, Arsenal, elevating Arsenal from Champions League finalists to Champions League winners, really elevating that squad. For me, I'll go, look, it's really exciting next few weeks to go before season starts, but I think if you said to me now, Arsenal's squad looks the strongest. And I know we're going to talk about other squads in this hour, but the only thing I'd sort of say is in terms of everything Darmish says there, in terms of, imagine if he could speak to other clubs in January, what wage he could demand. And that's the interesting thing for me in terms of the wage. Arsenal are spending well. They've done well recruitment-wise under Mikel Arteta. He made some big decisions when he came in. See you later, Aubameyang. See you later, Ozil. They were big players on big wages. The current crop, yes, he has spent big, but Saliba and Gabriel, when they've been given new contracts, they've deserved them. But Vinicius Jr. would walk in and what would he be? He'd be the highest payer by quite a distance, wouldn't he be?
What do we think? Give me a ballpark. Any idea?
I mean, £500,000 a week.
Yeah, I'd say at least that. I really would, yeah. And if he was to move, he'd probably ask for a bit more, wouldn't he?
We also got to say here that if there is a scenario where he doesn't sign a new contract and suddenly he is available to buy, I think Arsenal are positioning themselves very well here to be in a position where they can do this deal. I don't think we would be hearing of Arsenal's interest in a player like Vinicius Jr. They don't need to appease the fans or anything at the moment. They've just won the title. I think there's enough trust there with that board and the recruitment team from the fans to say, yeah, we trust in what these guys are doing. Let them get on with it. So it's one of those ones where we're hearing that they're interested in Vinicius Jr. To be interested in a player of that calibre, you must be in a position to be able to do such a deal. And when you say what impact this could have on other players in the squad, because they'll say, well, Vinicius Jr. has come in, he's on this much, we want this much. Sometimes a player can come into a club and have that X factor, and that is when the management of that team will come in, because Mikel Arteta will say, listen, guys, Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, I know you're on this much money, I know you probably want much more. This guy can take us to this level. Come along for the ride. All of the rewards will come once we start winning these trophies and these major trophies and qualifying for the latter stages of the Champions League, maybe even going one step further than did last season and winning the Champions League. So I think that side of it can be dealt with good man management. But I still believe that Arsenal will be in a position to be able to do a deal if there is a deal to be done, because it's still a big if.
Yeah, it is. Any other Arsenal news knocking about?
Yeah, potential departure looks very, very likely now. We saw Gary Cottrell out there in Dublin for this game against Real Betis. One player who isn't with the Arsenal squad is Christian Norgard. We told you earlier this week that a deal had been agreed between Arsenal and Everton for around £7 million for the midfielder, and he has now been given permission to travel to Merseyside to take a medical with Everton. He is not out there for this friendly in Dublin, for this pre-season match in Dublin. Remember, he only joined Arsenal from Brentford last summer for £10 million. Got a Premier League winners' medal, but he only actually started one Premier League game. And, you know, the amount, I think a lot of people are quite surprised about the lack of game time that he got, because now we see some of these midfielders at Arsenal who others feel may have been overplayed. Could they have been rested in certain games to allow the likes of Norgard to get a bit more game time? It didn't happen for him game time-wise last season. But interestingly, it's a similar scenario when people talk about Jordan Henderson. Whenever Mikel Arteta speaks about Christian Norgard, he is full of praise for what this guy does in and around the dressing room, the experience he brings, the talks that he has with the younger players in particular. So I think he actually will be missed at Arsenal. It might be a reluctant sale, but for the sake of his own career, I think Mikel Arteta and Arsenal know that he needs game time. He's not going to get it at Arsenal.
Yeah, indeed. All right, time for a break now. There's loads to come.